Statistical abstract. 1. Lamert Park was a late 1920s master plan community for upper and middle income families and named for its white developer, Walter H. Lamert, with homes modeled after the Spanish colonial revival architecture movement and a shopping center inspired by Japanese architecture. 2. It was one of the first communities to have a homeowners association. 3. The first time I went to Lamert Park, I was 20. I sat on a park bench after parking in the village's center, early for a mandated mask-making event hosted at LA Commons through my nonprofit arts internship. It was 10 a.m. on a sunny Sunday, and I was the only white person for miles. I called my dad before meeting my learning community. 4. First, mostly whites, Japanese Americans came post-World War II, closely followed by African Americans. After the Watts riots, more black people who could afford to leave the East Side moved to Lamert Park and the surrounding neighborhoods, Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw, and Inglewood. In 2000, Lamert Park's population of roughly 12,000 residents was estimated at almost 80% African American, the third highest in Los Angeles County. 5. Google attempted to fill in dead and gentrification to my online searches. The percentage of residents aged 65 and older in Lamert Park is one of the highest in the county. 6. In the 1940s, Central Avenue was the heart of LA's jazz and blues club scene. Former residents include Ella Fitzgerald and Ray Charles. The list of performers could go on forever. Nat King Cole, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker. 7. Briefly, in 2008, I thought I could be a professional jazz musician. My drum set teacher would blare one of the greats and my hi-hat would never feel stronger. The bass pedal tapped just ahead of the beat for momentum, and I swung the cymbal in a way that felt too rhythmic to be me. He shouted solo, and unwritten snare licks I was normally too timid to attempt tapped away. My hands loose but full, the wooden sticks warm, and not as sweaty anymore, unclenched. 8:05. In 2003, I cooked scrambled eggs and hummed along to the words of I Got Rhythm and Georgia on My Mind, vibrating through 2 sets of closed doors from the converted garage turned bedroom turned studio. At his happiest, my dad paints huge screens covering entire walls hung up with pushpins. From a dusty projector, he outlines faces from old newspapers or album covers and distorts smiles to clown-like fear and anger and lust. On a short white stool, he uses a roller sporadically and rushed over the highest corners, swinging his small hips. When he was attending UC Irvine for his master's in fine arts, my dad would go to blues shows with his coworker from Albertsons. Their friendship soundtrack is still my dad's favorite, full of the old greats, with a soft spot for Etta James and a schedule borrowed from his friend's LA Jazz Society membership. Scott and my dad hopped from Hollywood to Santa Monica to Culver City in thrift store suits. The baked potato at my place, Alley Cat. They drove to Santa Barbara to see John Lee Hooker and attended the Long Beach Jazz Festival a few years in a row. My dad quotes an online article, "The late 80s and early 90s were a swan song for jazz and blues." 9. In 2011, I gave my dad an Adele CD for Christmas, but she didn't sound anything like Etta on the speakers of his old Sony player with a tape deck. A year ago, I played him YouTube videos of Leon Bridges on the computer, and he nodded his head in time. 10. In June 2015, I let my father hang up the phone to do bills on his day off from Albertsons. I sat still, impressed by the evergreens lining the dirt path in Lamert Park Plaza and thankful for the canopy of shade. I pressed my thighs into the cold metal strips of the bench despite the price of red zebra stripes. An older man sat down next to me and asked me for my name and my number. He said I was beautiful. He said he had seen me sleeping there the night before. When I said, no, he said he must have made a mistake and left. I crossed the street to the front door of the building, the sidewalk empty, holding a bowl of sweating, underripe strawberries I had brought for the potluck lunch. We had been told to bring a favorite side from our culture. 11. From June to December 2016, Lamert Park's crime rate was 368.8 crimes per 10,000 people, higher than nearby Baldwin Hills Crenshaw, Exposition Park, and Hyde Park. Of the 129 reported violent crimes, 6 were rape and 69 were aggravated assault. 12. At the potluck, I admired another intern whose name I couldn't pronounce. An adult leader joked her name was close enough to Malia, President Obama's older daughter. A beautiful dancer home in Lamert Park for the summer, Maria attended an art school in Chicago. Not only a Facebook friend, but a real-life learning community friend for the summer, we exchanged phone numbers too. A 323 for an 805. 13. On the way back to my car, a man shouted down from his window 2 stories above, "White girl, get the fuck out of Lamert Park." 14. I drove back to Westwood with the cardboard mask I'd painted in my back seat. It now hangs on the wall of my dad's studio in Thousand Oaks. 15. I came back to Lamert Park a few weeks later with my visiting sister to stop by SO1 Books before a reading and ask if I could drop off apply cards for my internship's writing fellowship. The employee looked at my smile, his brow pulled down, and I forget if he said yes or no. On our way back to the car, a young man on the street asked my sister and me, 2 pretty white girls, to buy his mixtape, half rap, half poetry, and my sister did. She just finished her first year of teaching at Dijon Middle School in Richmond and said she'd bring it to school. I gave him a bright blue apply card with yellow font, but said no to giving him my phone number. 16. My sister and I went to the poetry reading at Post and Beam and stuffed ourselves with overpriced cornbread and roasted Brussels sprouts and mac and cheese served in colorful ceramic cookware under twinkly fairy lights strung across the patio's canopy. The organizer of the event let me stand up and make an announcement for the writing fellowship. People applauded politely. After the reading, I drove us 40 miles home on the 405 to the 101 to see our parents, and my sister said she was in awe of what I saw as artfully constructed fearlessness. 17. I want to go to an open mic at the World Stage. 18. I missed playing drum set when the music was too loud because I could ignore how bad I would sound with the music turned off. I miss playing drum set, period, and being a bolder version of myself. My dad never missed a concert, even when he had to come straight from Albertsons in Dickies and non-slip shoes. He texts me at least once a week. "I'm so proud of you." 19. In high school, with turf still in my shoes from the stadium, I would go into my dad's studio and close the door after practice ended, practicing extra to be as good as the boys, or good enough, attempting to memorize a snare lick or perfect a longer measured roll until my hands hurt and I was close to tears. 20. I am so pale I got sunburned every summer drumline practice through 3 layers of reapplied sunscreen, as well as sitting on the park bench in Lamert Park for 30 minutes under trees. 21. After 4 years, my dad stopped asking me if I miss music, and now he asks to read my stories instead. 22. At 22, I moved to a small house on the edge of Lamert Park off of Crenshaw. After I signed a lease and lugged books and a mattress into a small room, I drove back to Thousand Oaks with everything that didn't fit. My dad got home from work at 10:15 p.m. and gave me a big hug. "Is the neighborhood safe?" 323. Maria and I didn't stay in touch past the end of summer, and she doesn't post on social media very often other than the occasional dance video or a Bible quote. 24. My dad and I stayed up talking, and I tried to explain to him the complicated way I feel about being a part of gentrification, about moving into a neighborhood of families as a first wave of something to come and knowing I don't belong. He nodded and said he understood before adding, "When I moved to LA." 25. My dad had just turned 25 when he moved to Southern California for graduate school. He drove around downtown and got lost looking for an art show. He doesn't remember what street he was on, but he remembers glancing up and seeing huge, colorful produce signs painted on building walls. That's when he knew he was home. 26. On October 26th, a few months settled into the little house off of Crenshaw, I came back late on a Friday night. Streets were blocked off from every angle, and as I turned onto Coliseum on foot, I saw my street was clear of any car. A couple of hours before, my neighbors had knocked on the door to a house with no one home, hoping to help save my rusted Toyota Corolla from Swaney and McDonald towing. The next week, I was waved down on the sidewalk with an, "Oh honey, the Soul Food Festival happens this time every year." And I was able to say, "Thank you so much. Thankful to be home."